At the beginning, Kazuaki thought that it was a checkmate situation. The only options were yes and no. If he chose yes, then he would die, but if he chose no, Earth would be destroyed. He explained that it had been 10 years since the gate opened. That gate connected their world to another one. Those other worlds were usually fantastical realms filled with demon lords and heroes who fought against them. Every time a reincarnate returned from another world, the number of gates increased. Because of that, people from other worlds had stopped being something unusual. Some people even settled down in those worlds and worked there. However, there were still a few otherworlders who mostly had nothing to do with the people around them. Kazuaki considered himself the same. In fact, he found the problems of the real world far more concerning than anything related to other worlds. The scene then showed him standing in front of a girl who nervously confessed that she liked him and asked him to go out with her. With a proud expression, he thought that it was already the third confession he had received that month. Although he admitted that he was genuinely happy to receive a girl's confession, he also believed he could not understand why it kept happening. He described himself as average-looking, with a normal build and nothing particularly special about his income. The only reason he was popular with girls was because he worked at an all-girls boarding school as the only male teacher. Since he was the only man surrounded by adolescent girls, they naturally focused on him. He was convinced that once they entered society, they would never pay attention to someone like him. He politely apologized and told the girl to wait until she became an adult before thinking about that kind of thing. The girl immediately burst into tears and ran away, leaving him troubled. He thought to himself that there was no way he could risk losing his job by getting involved with his students. All he wanted was to live peacefully as a teacher. As he wondered why things always turned out this way, someone suddenly called out to him from behind. When he turned around, he saw the principal. She informed him that a transfer student would be joining his class the next day. Surprised by the sudden timing, he questioned it, but the principal explained that she would tell him the details the following morning. She only wanted him to prepare himself mentally in advance. Confused by her words, he could only react in disbelief. The next day, before class started, he introduced the new transfer student to the class and asked everyone to get along with her. The students immediately became excited and began wondering whether the new girl would be cute or beautiful. Hearing them, Kazuaki thought that he would already be satisfied if the transfer student turned out to be human. At that moment, the girl entered and introduced herself as Lumis Magna Overlay Luge, the daughter of the great demon Lord Lumianas. Silence immediately filled the classroom. Kazuaki realized that the students were not merely shocked, they were frightened. The great demon Lord Lumianes was infamous even in their world because countless reincarnates had challenged her and failed. Because of her terrifying reputation, everyone naturally assumed her daughter would be just as dangerous. Even so, Kazuaki reminded himself that he was still a teacher and that protecting his students was his responsibility. However, contrary to his expectations, the girls quickly surrounded Lumis and showered her with compliments, calling her cute and praising her hair while asking to become friends with her. Watching the scene unfold, Kazuaki sighed in disappointment and asked whether he could finally begin homeroom. He could not help but think that high school girls adapted to situations far too quickly. Later, in the male night duty room, Lumis complained that the place smelled strange. Kazuaki immediately defended the room, insisting that it was practically his home. He awkwardly admitted that it was his first time being responsible for an otherworlder and asked her to tell him if she had any requests or things he should be careful about. Lumis responded cheerfully, saying that if anything happened to her, she would have his head cut off, so he should take good care of her. Kazuaki nervously replied that such a statement was not something he could laugh about. Suddenly, Lumis excitedly declared that she wanted to experience falling in love. She explained that she had begged her mother to let her study abroad in this world for that very reason. Confused, Kazuaki repeated the word love before remembering a shoujo manga called In Love, which had even been adapted into a drama. He admitted that he had heard it was somewhat silly and therefore never bothered reading it. However, before he could finish speaking, Lumis's expression turned frighteningly serious as she demanded to know whether he had just insulted the series. Panicking, he immediately denied it and claimed that he actually loved it very much. Delighted by his answer, Lumis declared that In Love was a masterpiece and that everyone in the world should read it. Kazuaki could only think about how terrifying the Demon Lord's daughter truly was. Lumis explained that she genuinely wanted to experience a romance like the one in the story. Kazuaki then recalled hearing that arranged marriages were the norm in her country. Because of that, he understood why she admired the idea of romance so much. Deep down, Despite being the daughter of the great demon lord, she was still only a 17-year-old girl who longed to experience love. Feeling sympathetic, he promised to help her if there was anything he could do. Loomis happily replied that she would be counting on him. He then awkwardly asked her to stop calling him instructor, but she innocently questioned why, since he technically was one. Unable to argue further, he simply gave up on the matter. Later that night, Kazuaki sat alone eating noodles while thinking that Loomis was not nearly as troublesome as he had feared. Although she was somewhat arrogant, she did not seem like a bad person, and he believed they could coexist peacefully. Remembering her interest in romance, he even considered reading in love himself. Suddenly, he realized that a girl had silently appeared right in front of him. Startled, he demanded to know who she was and when she had arrived. The mysterious girl immediately covered his mouth and warned him to stay silent because she was on a top-secret mission. She claimed she could not guarantee his safety if her identity were exposed. After he agreed to remain quiet, she introduced herself as Satu, from the Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office's Otherworld Countermeasure Division. She then requested his cooperation under official authority. Confused, Kazuaki asked what she meant by cooperation. Sato explained that humanity constantly faced dangers from the other world. Ever since the gates opened 10 years ago, otherworlders had become widespread, and their culture, history, and especially magic surpassed human understanding. Her division existed to prevent and resolve any potential disasters caused by interactions with the other world. Although he acknowledged that the job sounded difficult, he still failed to see what any of it had to do with him. Satu then declared that the fate of Earth rested on his shoulders. Completely stunned, he demanded an explanation. Satu revealed that when Lumiane sent her daughter to study abroad, she made a declaration. If anything caused Loomis to cry, she would blow up Earth. Kazuaki tried to convince himself that the statement had to be an exaggeration, but Satu coldly explained that Lumiane has never joked about her declarations. The great demon lord had already defeated over 108 reincarnates, and her magical power was immeasurable. There was no doubt that she possessed the ability to destroy Earth. Even something as small as Loomis getting into a fight, losing someone close to her, or simply tripping and crying could trigger humanity's destruction. After processing the situation, Kazuaki argued that they should assign Loomis a bodyguard immediately. Satu, however, explained that Loomis hated being treated differently, which was why the mission had to remain secret. She also admitted that the countermeasure division barely had enough budget to pay her own salary. Hearing this, Kazuaki angrily complained that the division should care more considering Earth's survival was at stake. Satu then clarified that this was exactly why they needed his help. As Loomis's homeroom teacher, he was the closest human to her. Therefore, for 1 full year until Loomis graduated and returned to her world, he had to ensure that she never cried. She reminded him once again that the mission was top secret and that neither Loomis nor anyone at the school could ever learn about it. The next scene showed the students playing volleyball while Kazuaki nervously watched from the sidelines. He wondered why he had become involved in something that could potentially lead to Earth's destruction when all he wanted was a peaceful teaching life. He even worried that volleyball itself was dangerous because the ball could accidentally hit Loomis in the face. The very next moment, the volleyball struck Loomis directly in the face. Terrified, Kazuaki froze while the other girls apologized for the accidental pass. To everyone's surprise, Loomis merely laughed arrogantly and declared that something so weak felt like a mosquito bite to the daughter of the great demon lord. One of the girls then nervously pointed out that Loomis seemed to be tearing up slightly. Kazuaki nearly panicked, desperately hoping they were still safe. Soon afterward, the girls handed the ball to Loomis and told her it was her turn to serve. Confused by the term, Loomis asked what serve meant. Kazuaki explained that she simply had to hit the ball across the court. Since she was a beginner, he casually told her to hit it with all her might. Relieved that her tears seemed to have disappeared, he suddenly noticed dark magical energy forming around her. Loomis proudly announced that she would show everyone her power. Horrified, Kazuaki realized she was using magic and desperately tried to stop her, but it was already too late. Loomis smashed the volleyball with overwhelming force, completely destroying the wall behind the court as the ball flew through it. While everyone stared in shock, she calmly asked how many points she had earned. One of the girls nervously explained that because the serve missed the court, the turn simply switched over to the other side. Meanwhile, Kazuaki could only stare at the massive hole in despair and wonder how he was supposed to explain the damage. As he walked through the hallway later, he worried about how absurdly powerful Loomis's magic was. Suddenly, 2 girls from his class rushed over to him and nervously asked whether Loomis could possibly be transferred to another class. At first, Kazuaki understood their fear after witnessing such terrifying power. However, when he realized they had already discussed the matter with the entire class excluding Loomis, he immediately panicked and ran toward the classroom. Bursting through the classroom door, he prepared to address everyone about the previous day's incident. Instead, he discovered Loomis sitting alone in isolation while the rest of the class avoided her. Seeing tears beginning to form in her eyes, he felt pure terror, realizing that Earth itself was now on the verge of destruction. Just then, Loomis stood up and addressed the class. Kazuaki feared she might threaten revenge, but instead, she calmly explained that she had lived her entire life in the other world and did not fully understand how things worked in their world. She admitted that she had gone too far during volleyball because she was excited to show off her strength. However, she realized she had only frightened everyone. With a sad smile, she apologized and announced that she would return to the other world. Some students quietly admitted that it would probably be safer that way, but Kazuaki suddenly realized how selfish he had been. Instead of thinking about Loomis as a lonely 17-year-old girl, he had only been worried about himself and Earth's destruction. He finally understood how unfairly she had been treated. Stepping forward, he declared that the entire incident was his fault because he was the one who told her to hit the ball with all her strength. Therefore, Loomis was not to blame at all. When one girl argued that Loomis was still frightening, Kazuaki held out his hand and asked Loomis to shake hands with him. She hesitated in confusion, but he jokingly warned her not to grip too hard because he did not want to get hurt. Loomis carefully shook his hand. Kazuaki then showed the class that he was perfectly fine and explained that approaching Loomis was not scary at all. People could talk to her, joke around with her, and even hug her without any problems. To prove his point, he suddenly hugged her himself and told the class that they did not need to become especially close friends with her, they only needed to treat her like a normal classmate. Tears filled Loomis's eyes as she quietly asked when he planned to let her go. Embarrassed, Kazuaki immediately apologized for being inconsiderate. The girls then scolded him for suddenly hugging her before turning to apologize to Loomis themselves. They admitted that they had simply been frightened and asked whether they could still become normal classmates with her. Overcome with emotion, Loomis smiled warmly and said that she also hoped to get along with everyone. Watching the atmosphere finally return to normal, Kazuaki felt immense relief and believed that the entire situation had finally been resolved. However, he soon realized that he had been completely wrong. In truth, the real problems were only just beginning. 1 week later, the scene shifted to a group of girls reacting in shock as one of them exclaimed, "What? What did you just say?" Loomis calmly asked why everyone had suddenly become so lively. One of the girls excitedly asked her to repeat what she had just said. Loomis nervously explained that recently she had been feeling strangely restless, especially whenever she saw the instructor. She said her heart would pound, she would start sweating, and her body temperature would rise. In confusion, she wondered if he was some kind of shaman who had cursed her. One of the girls immediately shouted that it was love. Loomis reacted in complete shock and nervously asked if they were serious. The girl confidently assured her there was no doubt about it and told her to confess already. Another girl added that he had boldly defended her the other day, meaning she definitely had a chance, and suggested she ask him out on a date first. After hearing this advice, Loomis quietly admitted that maybe she should try doing that. Meanwhile, Kazuki had accidentally overheard the entire conversation while hiding beside the door. He thought that, as a guy, it honestly did not feel so bad to be liked that way. However, he also felt sorry because she was his student, and if she confessed, he would have no choice but to reject her. Later, the scene shifted to Kazuki sitting together with Satu. She commented that the situation was troublesome because it was rare for a teenage girl not to cry after getting rejected. Kazuki immediately agreed, saying it would be unbelievably stupid if the world were destroyed simply because a student got her confession rejected. Sato dryly replied that it was such a dark joke that it could not even be laughed at. She explained that even if he accepted Loomis's confession and started dating her, breaking up later would still bring about the wrath of the great demon king. In her opinion, accepting the confession should basically be treated as marrying her. Kazuki reacted in disbelief and said that only made him want to reject her even more. He also pointed out that teacher-student relationships were taboo to begin with. Satu questioned why he was worrying about morals when there was an even bigger issue involved. Kazuki looked confused and asked what she meant. She then asked if he truly did not know about the royal customs of the overlodges. Kazuki admitted he had no idea. Satu then revealed that whenever an overloge royal became pregnant, the husband would be eaten. Kazuki froze in shock and asked if she literally meant eaten. Satu clarified that it was not some kind of obscene metaphor. The husband would genuinely be consumed, just like a praying mantis. She explained that it was simply their culture, neither just nor unjust, merely a fact. Therefore, if Kazuki accepted Loomis's confession, he would eventually be eaten. Kazuki fell into despair as he realized the impossible situation he was trapped in. If he accepted her confession, he would die. If he rejected her, the world would be destroyed. He screamed that the situation was basically checkmate. Sato simply replied that this was the reality of things. She then asked him whether he could sacrifice himself for the sake of protecting humanity. Kazuki immediately screamed, no, panicking as he shouted repeatedly that he did not want to die and even cried out for his mother to save him. Sato apologized and admitted she had only wanted to present that option to him. Kazuki furiously yelled at her not to suggest insane things like that. He then desperately asked if he should just run away in the middle of the night. Sato rejected the idea, explaining that Loomis might cry if he suddenly disappeared without warning. Worse still, if the plans of the Countermeasures Division were exposed, the Earth would instantly be destroyed. Out of frustration, Kazuki proposed simply assuming Earth was doomed and moving humanity to another world. Sato calmly responded that such a thing was impossible, and that even if they somehow managed it, the Great Demon King would probably still kill him anyway. Kazuki shouted in frustration, demanding to know what he was supposed to do. Sato told him to calm down, but admitted he was right, there was basically nothing they could do. Even so, Kazuki refused to give up. While panicking internally, he desperately searched for any possible way to survive. Suddenly, he noticed a book nearby. Picking it up, he declared that this was the only solution. He immediately told Sato to listen carefully because he needed her help. Sato quickly agreed, saying they needed to prepare immediately. The next scene shifted to school, where Loomis nervously stood in front of Kazuki and asked if he wanted to go watch a movie with her. Meanwhile, her friends secretly hid behind a nearby wall, eagerly listening. Kazuki immediately realized this was the moment he had been expecting. He thought that even if he rejected the date invitation, she would probably confess at school afterward anyway. Therefore, he needed to take advantage of this opportunity somehow. Trying to stay calm, he agreed to the movie date, adding that it would also be a good chance to learn more about the culture of this world. Loomis happily celebrated while her friends quietly cheered for her from behind the wall. Later, while waiting for their meeting, Kazuki wondered why they had decided to meet somewhere instead of simply going together after school. However, he also realized it would be bad if the principal saw them together since the outing was supposed to remain secret. At that moment, Loomis arrived and apologized for making him wait. Nervously, she asked how she looked and explained that her classmates had helped her dress up for the occasion. Kazuki became slightly flustered because, being royalty, she looked incredibly beautiful. Trying to calm himself down, he told her she looked cute and that the outfit suited her very well. Loomis immediately blushed intensely, her entire face turning red. Embarrassed, she loudly insisted that, of course, she looked good, and quickly told him they should hurry and watch the movie. Kazuki noticed her blushing and became even more nervous. Once they arrived at the theater, Kazuki commented that it had been a long time since he had gone to the cinema and asked what she wanted to watch. Loomis excitedly looked at all the different movies before pointing toward a poster for Titanic. Kazuki instantly rejected the idea in his head because he was certain she would cry. He panicked internally, wondering why Titanic was making a comeback at the absolute worst possible time. Loomis then suggested a horror movie instead. Kazuki figured that, at the very least, she probably would not cry during that. However, during the movie, the daughter of the Great Demon King became completely terrified. Loomis nervously asked if humans were truly allowed to create such horrifying things. Kazuki quietly told her to watch the movie silently. Suddenly, she tightly grabbed his hand in fear. Kazuki immediately became flustered and desperately tried to calm himself down. Afterward, the scene shifted to a restaurant. While eating pancakes, Loomis happily exclaimed that the food was unbelievably delicious and unlike anything she had ever tasted before. Kazuki smiled and asked if she really liked it that much. Since he was already full, he offered her half of his portion as well. Loomis excitedly asked if she really could have it, and Kazuki nodded. As he watched her happily eating, he noticed cream stuck on her face. While looking at her innocent expression, he realized that despite being the daughter of the Great Demon King, she was still just a normal 17-year-old girl. After that, they spent time at the arcade playing games together and genuinely enjoying themselves. Later, while walking back home, Loomis happily declared that the date had been extremely fun and suggested they go on dates every day if dates were always this enjoyable. She then asked Kazuki if he had fun too. Kazuki paused briefly before admitting that he did enjoy himself, though internally, He added that it would have been easier without constantly fearing for his life. Loomis smiled brightly and happily said they felt the same way. Suddenly, however, she became serious. Kazuki immediately sensed what was coming. Loomis nervously explained that there was something she could not say at school and wanted him to listen carefully. Kazuki asked what it was while internally panicking, convinced she was finally about to confess. Loomis then spoke honestly about how he had helped her when she failed at volleyball. She admitted that she had felt like she did not belong in that world and had nearly cried, so his kindness had made her incredibly happy. She explained that before she realized it, her feelings had already grown into something deeper. Just as she was about to say that she liked him, a massive firework exploded in the sky behind them, drowning out her words completely. Confused, Kazuki asked her to repeat what she had said. Loomis tried again, but the exact same thing happened. Another loud firework exploded before he could hear her confession. Embarrassed and flustered, she awkwardly gave up. Kazuki looked toward the sky and commented on how massive the fireworks were before asking her once more what she had been trying to say. Loomis nervously brushed it off, claiming it was nothing and simply saying she was grateful to him. She then hurriedly suggested they head back. Nearby, two women watching the fireworks wondered aloud why there were fireworks that night when no festival had even been scheduled. Meanwhile, Kazuki secretly smiled to himself, realizing the plan had worked. The scene then shifted to Satu standing beside the fireworks launcher. She muttered that the operation had been a success, though she also angrily complained about what kind of ridiculous plan Kazuki had come up with. A flashback then revealed Kazuki explaining the strategy earlier. He had suggested launching fireworks the moment Loomis confessed, so he could pretend not to hear her. According to him, that was the only way to avoid either accepting or rejecting the confession. Satu had doubted whether such a ridiculous idea could actually work, but Kazuki argued that situations exactly like that happened all the time in romantic comedy manga. Back in the present, Sato grumbled about how difficult it had been to prepare fireworks alone, especially since fireworks and boats were expensive and technically illegal. However, she admitted it was still a small price to pay if it meant preventing Earth's destruction. The next day at school, Loomis cheerfully greeted everyone. Her friends immediately rushed over and eagerly asked how the date had gone. Loomis casually replied that nothing special really happened and that it had simply been a normal date. Her friends reacted with visible disappointment. Meanwhile, Kazuki reflected that although they had successfully saved the Earth, the situation had actually become even more dangerous. At that moment, Loomis greeted him by his first name, calling him Kazuki. Kazuki froze in shock, realizing she had suddenly dropped the formalities. The entire classroom immediately erupted into excitement as the students screamed that the two of them were already on a first-name basis and demanded to know what had happened between them. Some even began teasing Loomis by asking how far things had gone. Embarrassed and flustered, Kazuki quickly ordered everyone to return to their seats. However, deep down, he realized the danger level had only continued to rise.